This audio file comes from the L'Abri Ideas Library at www.labri-ideas-library.org. The library contains over 1,000 lectures and discussions which explore questions about the reality and relevance of Christianity. We ask you to respect the copyright for this audio file, which belongs to L'Abri Fellowship. The file is for personal use to share with friends, family and colleagues, but please do not publish the material in any format or post it on a website without seeking prior permission from L'Abri Fellowship.
Prehistory of modern art. And I will repeat this during the lecture, but there will be 3 points. 3 jumps from, let's say, old art, which is before 1750, to modern art, which is after 1911. So the whole thing will be crammed between 1750 and 1911. There will be 3 jumps. The first jump is the loss of content, the loss of a theme. So instead of having a theme, something that is depicted by the picture, there's now only a copying of reality. So only the things you can see are copied. So it's a loss of theme. This is the first jump. The second jump is that when people started to paint reality, just what they see, that at a certain moment a very strange thing happened, that it was almost like reality was vanishing behind the paint. That's the second jump. This was 1885. And the third jump happened in 1911 with Picasso's going over to the absurd. These 3 jumps were not just jumps that I'm thinking of because I'm clever, but these were the jumps that are really known and felt by those who were involved. These were very heavy jumps, and they was almost like going through a sound barrier. When you go on an aeroplane, there's something very difficult to go through. It's like a sound barrier. And when you go through, there's a big noise, and something happens. And this is what I will show, that something happens. That for the painter themselves, there's much involved, and the surroundings react very, very severely and heavily. There's a second question before we start. So there are 3 jumps from old art to modern art. First, let's say the jump from a painting with a theme to just realism or naturalism. The second, the loss of reality behind the paint. And the third, the jump to absurdity. But before, if we want to understand something of these jumps, we got to understand what painting means. And painting in the Western tradition means something very special. And therefore I begin a bit much earlier in history. I begin, let's say, far away in the Middle Ages, where I try to make understandable why in the Western European tradition painting means so much, that it is almost a religion, that it's almost philosophy. It's much more than just a nice thing to look at. If it was just a nice thing to look at, just as we in the Western tradition look at, let's say, ceramics or bracelets or things on this level, in this level something like this was impossible to happen because they are just, well, nice things to look at, things to use. But painting has an additional value. And for that reason I begin far away with the icon. May I have the first one? So, well, this is very hard to see, I'm sorry, but we have to try to visualize. And what we see is a Madonna. It's a painted, it's Mary with the child. I could show you thousands and thousands of 10,000s of pictures like these. There's nothing special in it. There's nothing extraordinary. So a Madonna, like we're looking at, is not a depiction of something which happened in reality. It's not a picture of what you could see in the year 0 in Bethlehem. It isn't. It's neither a view of something you could see in heaven nowadays, but it is something like a Mariological statement about something which is very important religiously. It's the importance of Mary as the Mother of God, to whom we can go to, etc., etc. Of course, this is in a Roman Catholic setting. So this painting, this Madonna, is not just something that can be seen, or was seen, or should be seen, or was a fantasy by the artist, but it's a theological statement. It's almost like a sermon about something which is very important. And so the painting itself is almost holy. And we know that there were very important paintings of this type who were really so holy that they did miracles, and there were legends built around the painting. So we must understand, and this was what I tried to emphasize, that this painting is not just something beautiful. Of course, if we want to pay honor to Mary, then we must make the picture beautiful. Just as if we praise God with our song, we try to sing good, and we not on purpose sing in the wrong way, or roughly, or false, or something. We try to sing beautiful, and so the painter tried to paint beautiful. But it's not the beauty which counts, but it's Mary what counts. And it's really the content which is very strongly emphasized. May I have the next one? The same applies to something like this. Well, I'm sorry again, this is dark. This is Christ with John the Baptist, and he is baptizing Christ, and there's the Holy Spirit above him. So it's the baptism of Christ. Again, this picture is one of thousands and thousands in the Middle Ages. And why did they depict so often the baptism of Christ? Because it was a depiction of the Holy Trinity. It was the first time in the Gospel, and it's the clearest moment in the Gospel where there's something about the Trinity. So it's almost a sermon, a theological statement. Why I brought this picture, and I'm sorry it is not so easy to look at this moment, but you have this composition, and in the background you see there's a landscape. And this is something new. This is the 15th century which brings in something new. It's not only the theological statement, but nature comes in. And these two, they come together at exactly the point where Christ's feet are in the river. If we remove the figures, we have just a landscape. If we bring the landscape away, take the landscape away, we just have the baptism. But these two come together at where the feet of Christ stand in the water. And then we see that difference of scale. Christ is much bigger in scale than the small river, which is almost like a gutter if you compare it to the scale of the figures in front. What we see here is a solution to a very deep-felt problem in the 15th century, that with the introduction of nature in the arts, you had almost two contents. You had the content which was the old theological Christian content, and you have the new content which is the depiction of nature. And here, Piero della Francesca, had his own peculiar solution to the problem. May I have the next one? Oh, I'm sorry. These colored slides are really very bad for this maybe little bit too light room. But just try to use your imagination, so that may help. If we look a bit longer, then we realize there's again a virgin, but which is difficult to see, that she is a very beautiful girl at the same time. And what I can tell you, that this girl was not just a girl, or not just a fantasy by the artist, but was a portrait of his mistress. So now you have a double thing. You look at the picture, and the picture is at the same time a virgin and the portrait of the mistress of the artist. Well, if you're Roman Catholic and Mary is very important to you, this almost sounds as blasphemy. And it did. So there's a contradiction in the picture. There are two kinds of content. The content of, the nice girl, the beautiful girl, the lovely girl in the world of us, and the high theological statement of something in the supernatural. So this was a very high tension, and this tension came to a conclusion by a kind of revolution something very violent in the end of the 15th century, but Savonarola preached against it. And Botticelli, who made this painting, was the first one to bring his own paintings to the stake to have it burned. So he thought, I can't go on like this, so he took his own paintings and brought them on the stake, and they were burned. Yes, please sit down. So, the next step, of course, is to try to solve this problem and to have something which is really holy without losing the new possibilities of the naturalism of the 15th century. The depiction of nature should be brought in, synthesized with the holy content. And this is what Raphael's work was, the High Renaissance. Yes? And this is the Sistine Madonna. The Sistine Chapel Madonna is really a Madonna. And although here in the details how these clothes are depicted, etc., you know that he uses very cleverly the things that were won and conquered in the 15th century. But to make sure that she is Mary and not just a girl, he places her upon clouds. They are clouds. She is flying in the air, floating in the air upon clouds. And clouds mean this is supernatural. This is above the normal. This is the world above our world. And if we would look at the face and we could see it, many of you will not be able to see it, but you just believe me, it's a very beautiful face, and it's not a portrait. It's a generalized portrait. This is something which is almost a system. No, I think it's sharp enough. I don't think that's a problem. So here you have a generalized, beautiful face, which is not the face of a woman, and so it can be the face of Mary, the Mary. You must understand, I'm just going quickly through this. It's at the same time an introduction to my Friday night lecture when I'm going to talk about the 16th century on. But I just do this in the first place to make you understand that these changes in style have something to do with content, with new theology, with new visions, with new meanings. It's not just because the styles change and people change and things change, but there's a new theology, a new approach behind it. And this is the Western tradition, that we, as soon as something changes in the cultural atmosphere, in the theology, are changes. Very interesting is in this case is that this is a solution to the problem, how can we make sure that the thing that we see and which is so naturalistically rendered is not just a depiction of something in reality, but is something supernatural. Another solution to the problem was brought by, was done by Lucas from Leyden, a Dutch painter, who did it in a different way. And this is I'm sorry that you cannot see it properly, but here's a man sitting in a landscape. It's St. Paul. And if you would see it really in reality, you would realize after a while that Paul is a supernatural person in these natural surroundings, and that we know it because he has more light. So if you realize there was a natural light, the sun, or, well, just a hazy day, light was shining, from that side it comes, then he could not be as bright as he is. So let's say there's a double sun on the figure, double in comparison to what's on the landscape. So we know there's something extra here. And this is another device invented to make holy and make a difference between the holiness and the non-holy, between the supernatural and natural. Again, this is just to make you understand how important painting is and how it is tied up with things. Yes? This is a very interesting example of the 17th century. It's in the Chiesa Nuova in Rome, and this is by Rubens. Of course, this is a silly slide because the picture is higher than this room. It's a very high and large picture. But the interesting thing about it is that the whole thing just turns around this. And that's the Madonna, which is large as this, probably. And this Madonna, which is an older And second-rate painting is the thing. This is the Holy Madonna. And what Rubens has done is just painting this, well, to put it in musical terminology, this fanfare, this big music around it, just as an introduction to the painting. It is just as if the brass band begins to play. Now the big thing is coming, and then the big thing is coming. And in fact, it is, if you look at it statistically, a second-rate painting. But it is not a second-rate painting. It is the Madonna. It is the icon. In fact, it's not only this. There are two paintings side by on each side, one painting just as large and big as this, with saints who bring homage to the Virgin, to this Virgin. So here we see Rubens as a painterly musician making an introduction to the thing. So this makes us understand only how important a painting can be, that you make such an introduction to it and give it such a surrounding. Yes? And now we get the big jump. No, just one little side line for one moment. What happened in the Protestant countries? Because what you saw was 17th century Baroque. What it is, the Protestant countries. Yes, that's right. There, of course, they stopped painting Madonnas, etc., etc., but they brought in something else. And here I just brought one little painting, painting just as large as this. One of the most beautiful paintings, which is in the Boijmans Museum in Rotterdam, by Saanderdam, a church interior. And here, many people have a misunderstanding of this type of painting. They think it is just, well, the man sat in the church and he thought this is a beautiful view, and he just painted it. As I will show you later, this is a misunderstanding, and this is looking at the painting like this in a 19th century way. Because the painter, of course, made sketches, but he painted this at home, and what he tried to depict was much more than the eye can see. It is the full reality, which is always more than the eye can see, the full reality of the thing. It's almost like a hymn about the beauty of God's created world. It's the light here. It is the reality of the plaster. It's the reality of the organ. It's the reality of these colored porches, etc., etc. It is the still life in the 17th century, just the genre paintings. Things as simple as this, they have a meaning much more than just the things we can see. Just let's say what a photographic machine can bring on its chemical surface and develop into a photograph. There's something much deeper and wider. It's a hymn on reality. Well, I will leave it at this, but this is a very important notion, that we must understand that it is not just the depiction of reality. And now I'll make the biggest jump to begin with, yes, and that is this picture, which just looks at the 15th century Madonna, and it is. But I must tell you a little story around this picture. This picture was made by Piero della Francesca, the same man who made the baptism of Christ, for a little church in the surroundings of Urbino. So it has been since the 15th century till 90 or 95 in Urbino. And then Napoleon came to Italy, and what Napoleon did was taking all these pictures out of the church and bring them to Paris, to the Louvre. He built in the Louvre a museum which has been the largest museum ever to be seen in the world. It was there just as long as Napoleon reigned, and all the important artworks of all Europe were brought together there. So you could see there the Piero della Francesca out of Urbino. But there's something happened in the transportation from Urbino to the Louvre, because in transporting it, it lost its icon quality, its being important as Mary, and it landed in the Louvre as a work of art. This is a change. So after the Napoleonic time, it didn't return to the Urbino church, but it's now in the Brera in Milano. And you go to the Brera in Milano not to adore Mary, not to be convicted of this great deity, or how you may phrase it, And the picture is not an icon anymore, but now it is a work of art. So something has happened in between. This is a big change which occurred in the 18th century. And of course the French Revolution and Napoleon coming immediately behind it and being the following up of it, they did it more or less. Because we must know and understand the violent anti-Christian feeling in the French Revolution and in Napoleon. And when I say anti-Christian, it is specifically anti-Roman Catholic. So the churches, sometimes people talk about the iconoclasm of the 16th century, the Protestants taking sculpture out of the church, but this has never been as worse to these churches and these works of art as what the French Revolution did. In France, all these big cathedrals are almost empty, and everything that was in it was destroyed by the French Revolution. The Renaissance, the Reformation never did something as heavy and as compassionate, as passionate as this in destroying works of art. So we must understand there's a big jump. And now I must enlarge a little bit about the 18th century. The 18th century, as I said 2 days ago, if I remember well, I said God was said very gently and very kindly, please go out of the door. We have very serious things to do. We're sorry. So God was put out of the door. He will not say, you don't exist. God exists. And if things get very difficult, sometimes we get him in and say, well, this is what God made. But when we talk seriously, then we don't need God because, well, God is something very subjective. Some people think about it. And some people believe about him. And some people pray to him. And some people even think that you can reach him in some way or another. But it's always subjective. Nobody knows. Because the only thing that counts is that we as human beings, by being human, can understand by our own brains. So we take away the candle, the light of the Bible, and we put up our own light. So they called it, this movement in the 18th century, the Enlightenment. I think it's the most strange name any human movement gave to itself. We are going to make the light. This is the Enlightenment. It's almost too much to say this from yourself. But there's a strong feeling in this. And this change is a very deep change. It is the change in Western culture. The deep break. If before those days, and we can understand it in philosophy maybe easiest, before those days people were thinking in terms of ontology. Ontology means how is the world made? So you can have an ontology that always starts with where is God, where are the things, where are the plants, the animals, man, where are norms, good, bad, how are they fitted together? How is this made up? And there are many theories about this, and you try just to rationalize your knowledge and experience of reality. We call this ontology. So for somebody before 1750, it was always like this. Here's God, here's man, here's this, here's that. This is how the world is made of. And set in each other. This is the structure of the world. This was blown up, this was destructed in the middle of the 17th century by one sentence of Descartes, who said, well, I don't know anything about it. Who tells me that the world around me is real? Who tells me that I'm real? Well, there's one thing that I know that is real, that I'm thinking. So I think, and therefore I am. And this is the basic principle of the Enlightenment. Because now we start with man. By the way, in between parentheses, to understand how Western European this is, we say, we think, and therefore we am. We are. But the Negroes in Africa tend to say, we sing, and therefore we are. And I think this is just to make you clear that this is Western European thinking to say, I think, and therefore I am. It means at the same time that it is all very, very intellectual. So now the starting point is with man. So what is after the Enlightenment, or in the beginning of the Enlightenment, basing themselves on Descartes, who was the real father of this whole movement, the big point is that we change now from ontology to epistemology. How can we know there's something around us? How do we know what reality is? So there's no ontology, but we start with us. And we put our eyes open, and the first question is, am I there? Yes, we think. So what I'm thinking about, what do I see? And now I try to build up something out of my perception of the world. So the changes from there is a world, and I'm somewhere in this world, to I'm only there, and now I try to find what the rest is. This is a change, a very deep change. And what I tried to make clear out of philosophy, just the same happened in art. At the moment people began to think in these lines, work in these lines, feel in these lines, have an emotion in these lines, it's not just thinking, it goes, the whole man is concerned in this. As soon as people changed in this way, of course, painting was afflicted. But there's a deep change, and I would put it this way, what happened in the 18th century is what is the things we are talking about now. What was then thought of, theorized, rationalized, what was the main concern of a little small circle of philosophers, gradually spread through Europe, gradually spread down through the social layers, and now it's on the street. So basically what the Beatles said yesterday is what was said in the 18th century by the philosophers. It just has gone down and has brought with it despair. This is Mr. Schaeffer's line of despair, which you can see in this way. Art was afflicted, but as I will show you, it just doesn't happen in one day, although some people immediately understood in the 18th century all the applications, but generally speaking it took, well, let's say 2 centuries. And the 3 jumps are the main jumps to realize what's the consequences of the system of the 18th century and to bring it down to reality. The beginning is art in the old line, and the end is absurdity of man in the picture. And I will show you the jumps now. The first man, or at least one of the first men, to really realize what happens was Goya. To make clear what Goya said, I just have one old picture more. And that is this Titian. I left out because I can't show you everything this morning. I will show you this one picture of the old humanist line. Beside the Christian pictures that I showed you, or the Roman Catholic pictures, I'm going to show you a humanist picture. This is 16th century too, and what I deliberately chose this picture because we have so many Venuses. And to make clear to you that a Venus is not just, let's say, a picture of a woman lying without clothes on a couch, it's different. It is an idea. It is some of these ontological statements about the importance of beauty and love. Love and beauty, they belong to each other, and Venus is the personification of love and beauty. And so this picture is not a strange pornographic picture of a man looking at an unclothed woman. It is nothing like this, because if you look well, and probably you cannot see it now properly, but there are two differences in space. There are 2 spaces in this. There's a difference in space. She is lying in another space, and here these 2 spaces come into each other. She is lying in another space as the player. There are 2 layers of reality in it. And what this picture wants to say is that music is always introduced, always inspired by love and beauty. So the organ player looks around and he looks to love and beauty. There's nothing pornographic, nothing strange in this picture. Nobody before the 19th century ever could understand this picture to be pornographic, because everybody understood here are statements about, these are ontological statements. This is how man and his music is in relation to a big principle which is outside of man, love and beauty. Now, as soon as the ontological structure goes completely, and it all starts with man, then this is nonsense. And the first man to realize this, the deepest artist, is the man that not only me, but everybody who knows something about the history of painting will call the first modern artist. and his name is Goya, around 1800 in Spain. And Goya, he depicts this woman on a couch. So what he does is working in the old tradition of unclothed female, or let's say female nudes, on lying female nudes. Now that's the short name for the tradition. Lying female nudes. Nothing special. It has been done thousands of times. But now, for Goya, he wants to make you understand that it isn't as easy as you think of, and it's not just simply tradition, because he thinks, what do I really do? And then what you see here, in reality, is not Venus. He calls it Maya, by the way. It's not Venus, but it's Maya, and Maya is just the name of, let's say, a low-caste woman. But we know that in reality it's a picture of a real woman, his mistress. And to make sure that you understand that it's nothing in the old tradition, but it's really something new, a picturing, a portrait of a nude, of a naked woman, probably better to say. He makes a second picture. Yes, may I have that one? And that is a slide which is too dark, unfortunately. But here you have exactly the same woman, but she's clothed. And he made it at the same time. It's the clothed Maya and the naked Maya who he made. And this, of course, I'm sorry, it's just your fantasy that has to go. She probably is more sensuous clothed than she is without clothes, but that's another problem. The fact is that this is for the first time that you have these two together. And he just wants to make sure that you understand that the unclothed woman is not Venus, is not love and beauty, but that she is this woman, this particular woman. Because Venus, you cannot clothe Venus. As soon as you put clothes around Venus, she's not Venus anymore, she's something else. She may be Flora, or she may be Mercury, or one of these female goddesses, Juno. But she will never be Venus again, because Venus by definition is without clothing. So you cannot clothe Venus, but you can clothe a woman. So he makes a double picture just to make sure that something has changed. And it's a very deep thing that has changed. So he's just playing with the old tradition and make sure that you understand. Of course, many people did not understand and they invented stories around it. But I'm not talking about the stories, but I'm talking about Goya. Yes, may I have the next one? A second picture which he made, well, he made many more, but which is very interesting in this respect, is this picture of the 8th of May, 1808. The picture was painted many years later, 1820, but it is a depiction of something which happened in this particular day in May 1808. What happened in that day was that there was a revolt in Madrid. Madrid was captured by the French troops in Spanish Madrid. The Spanish made a revolt against the French, and the French just finished the revolt in one day, and many thousands of people were executed that very night. So here you have the execution of that particular day. So what happened? Heroes for Spain and the great nation of Spain and freedom and righteousness have stood up and now are martyrs of these brutal people who killed them very unjustly, killing freedom. Is that what happens? We don't see any of that. We just see here some people and they are killed. Or is it like this, that here you have these bad people overthrowing the real good order, the order of the state, and there's the state to bring order again, and so very righteously and justly these people are executed by right justice. Is that the case? Nothing like that. They are just soldiers killing. So this is what Goya brings in. It is the problem in the 18th century. Before the 18th century, maybe I told it you before the 18th century, stealing was something which was wrong because God has said it's wrong to steal. After the 18th century, when man makes it himself, he invents the contrat social. He says, in the very beginning of history, when people began to find out that it's very nasty and you cannot work anymore if everybody steals everybody's things. Imagine that you had not this rule here that you couldn't steal. Everybody would not be here, but sitting to look at his own property upstairs because you couldn't move. So we invent just together, well, we make a rule, do not steal, please. So, but this is this human rule, and it's just utilitarian. Well, tomorrow the situation may change. And so, what Goya says here, it's just the same. There is not a divine rule, and there is no justice, and there is no freedom. The right is not on one side or the other. It is just people who are revolted, and they are killed, and here you have the killer. Killer and those killed. That's all. There's nothing more. This is a big change from what was before the 18th century. And to make this understandable, I have another thing, because Goya made more or less a copy of this. And this is a cheap print, an English print, by the way, depicting how Napoleon killed many people in Toulon. So here you have the state, the unrighteous army, firing on these innocent people. And you see that the painter has tried to make clear these are innocent people. You see the way they look, and they cry for help, they cry for mercy, they cry for help to God and say, God, isn't this horrible, unjustified? We are killed. And here you have the proud and very severe and very cruel officer, and he is saying, shoot. Well, this is involved. There are values. But Goya said there ain't no values. There's nothing like that. They are just people killed, and they are the killers. You see, there's a change. It's very interesting to note, because Goya knew this, and he used this for his own picture as one of the things to begin with. But there's a change in between. This is still old in its principle, and the other one is very modern and new in its principle. Yes? That this change from ontology to epistemology, yes, that's right, I hope so, is afflicting very deep things in art, can be seen also in this early picture by Corot. What Corot does here is the picture he sent to the Salon, and it is just like a Claude Lorrain. Claude Lorrain is the big landscape painter of the 17th century. So here you have the road, you have these trees, and here you have the river. But there's a second picture. May I have the second picture, and the other one back after a while? Yes? Yes, the other one, and then, yes. This is what he made on the spot. You see, this is made on the spot. Here you have the river, you have this ruined aqueduct, you have the river, somewhere in Italy. And this is the modern picture. This is depicting what you see. And now he adds up something to make it look like an old picture. Because he feels people are not as far as that they understand just a depiction of nature, so he makes it up for, let's say, the average man. But the strange thing is that I cannot show you things like this side by side in the 17th century. Because for the 17th century this was not made up nature, but this was nature. Because these people were not just depicting little coins of nature, but they were depicting the structure of nature. So this is the structure of Italian landscape. Well, for Corot there was not a structure because it didn't exist anymore. You had only the things you could see. So you had just a little corner of landscape. May I have the other one back? You see, they are side by side. This is a new problem. A very new problem, a 19th century problem. You never had that before. May I have the next one? The man who probably was deepest in understanding these things was Delacroix. He was the man who made this picture in 1830. Well, I'm sorry, but many of you will know it out of textbooks. It is freedom on the barricades in Paris in the revolt of 1830. Delacroix is sympathetic with the revolt, which brought in a new government. And here you have real people, even portraits, people fighting on these barricades, and in the middle you have this female this woman who is France. France is leading the people over the barricades towards a new freedom. Something like this. This is probably the last of the old pictures. This is the last of the pictures based on the old principle of before the Enlightenment. But for Delacroix, that's so very curious. I was beginning to say, it's not me that has problems. It is not my thinking about it, but it's the problems of the painters that I'm talking about. And if you look in the diary of Delacroix, you see him wrestling with this problem, and he wrestles really. And I can show you that in in 2 slides. So may I have the next one after this? This is a painting. It's small. It's like this. It's a painting he made in 1823. And what it is in reality is something completely new in the history of art. If you just take Goya away, because it's the same problem as with Goya. What you see is a portrait of an unclothed woman. She is without clothes, and it's just a portrait from here to there. So it's not a nude in the sense of Titian made, but it is a portrait of an unclothed woman. And now the problem is, and this is how Delacroix stated this in his diaries, and I'm talking about nudes because in Western tradition they mean so much, because formerly the nude was always the principle. It was something like an ontological statement. This is what it meant to Rubens and all the Baroque, and we are just in this tradition. So that's why they paint nudes, not for pornographic reasons, but for very deep reasons, and it's a tradition. But now Delacroix talks about this. He says, how can I come from depicting, portraying what I see, to the nude? May I have the next one? He tries to do it in a painting like this. This is the detail, and if you look at this nude, it's a nude in the tradition of Rubens. Well, it's a bit too dark. Maybe if I stand a bit higher. Well, but this is, let's say, a Rubenesque nude. But for Delacroix, he knew that in a way he was lying. He says, I'm painting this because I've looked so much to Rubens. But how in the world came Rubens to paint it? I don't understand it, but because what Rubens saw, yes, may I have the other one back? Because what Rubens saw was just the same as I see. It's an unclothed woman. And the curious fact is, if I go through the drawings of Rubens and his sketches, I never come across something like this. It doesn't exist. If he has a model and he paints after the model, something turns out which is that what was a great problem to Delacroix to get at. Because he just is not painting what he sees only. He uses his eyes, but he is not painting only what he sees, but he makes a statement about woman, including womanhood, including all the human and unhuman things that are surrounding and are belonging to the concept of woman, or beauty, or love, or everything that goes with it. But now it's only the thing that you can see. It's almost a neutral statement. There's nothing moral, nothing immoral in it. It's a neutral statement. This is what I see. You could use a photographic machine for it. And in fact, as soon as the photographic machine was invented, it was invented during the lifetime of Delacroix, not just as random, not by chance, because people were searching for it, because it's a new way to look at reality. So as soon as a new machine came, the first man to hail it was Delacroix, and he bought photographs of nudes just to study this problem. He was even shocked by looking at them the first time. He said, I always have looked at the female with the eyes of the past. She is different. The photographic machine says she is different from what I see. So he tries now, for him, the problem is even more difficult. This was before the machine was invented. Now, 20 years later, the machine is there. But then he says, well, that's reality. That's truth. But I want to have the old truth. But how can I get to it? It was a real fight in Delacroix's life. His life was consumed by this. He had great love. He had great understanding for the past. But he had lost the contact with it and the understanding for it. It was a fight how to come to ontology from epistemology. This is, in philosophic terms, the problem. Yes? A man who was more in the classical tradition was anger. But an interesting thing is that if anger makes a lying nude, a female nude, it is not Venus anymore. He calls it Odalisque. And Odalisque is the favorite concubine of the king of Turkey. What is his name? The Sultan. So the Sultan has a harem, and the favorite woman in there is an Odalisque. So what you see is here an ideal sexual object. So what he is depicting, Ingres, is not the Venus of Titian. It's not a Venus anymore. It's just an ideal sexual object. I think it's important to put it like this. But still it is surrounded with some kind of ideality. But you feel already with this man, couched in the old tradition, trying to work on the tradition. In a way, Delacroix was a renewer, but this man wasn't. He didn't want to be a renewer, but yet he had lost the sense of Venus. Well, we can understand something of this loss if we look at the next slide, which was one of these lithographs made by Daumier. Daumier made a whole series of ancient history, as he calls it. And here you have Oedipus and the Sphinx. And you see, if you depict it like this, of course you have killed the ancient and high history. You made something silly about it. He says, well, this Oedipus was just a bragging man. And you see, bragging for this horrible, well, she's not aloft and high, and, well, you know how these classical people can talk about it. He says it's just an ugly female. And very ugly at that. She's jealous. Well, he depicted the whole history like that. You have histories of Odysseus, who is coming back, and that Penelope, you know. Penelope, how you pronounce that? And she is waiting for him. Well, you see a very, very old and thin woman, and a spinster, and the ugliest kind. And, well, then the whole story is gone. Well, after this has made, of course, you cannot depict any more any old history, because as soon as you begin, it is almost absurd. It is absurd, because in a way it is completely lost, because formerly, before 1750, these classical stories meant something. They didn't mean people in the past were like that, but they meant this is how man should be. It was a humanistic statement about the greatness of man. But Daumier said, where's the greatness of man? That's an invention. I've never seen the great man. You see, if we only begin with ourselves and what we see, all these ideals, the ontological statements, even the greatness of man falls down and is left to nothing. It's crushed. The first man to really realize this was Courbet. And again, I'm sorry that you didn't see so much, but Courbet depicts here in a very large painting, as large as this. Well, if you cut through this building, this is how large the picture is. And here are some women waning, is that the right word? Getting chaff out of... winnowing. Well, good. Thank you. Winnowing. So, there are women winnowing. And there is another picture just as great and large where men are working with stones. So are the stone breakers. Well, what's new about it? What is new about it? What is new to make it as large as this and say, in making it large, in the French tradition, see, these women winnowing or these men stone breaking are as important as the greatest history in the world. Formerly, even David had given the rape of the Sabine women, or some high history like that, which was always a statement about some kind of reality, some higher kind of principle in reality. But principles are gone, and things which are not to be seen, or cannot be seen, are not there. There's an explicit statement by Courbet, I cannot paint angels because I've never seen one. And what I see are men stone breaking, are women winnowing. And this is just the most important thing in life. This is the only thing that counts. The rest is just rubbish, invention of man, make-believe. It's nothing. So, the next one, we will see the same Courbet, people returning from the fair. peasants returning from the fair. Again, it's a big picture. And of course, we understand the same thing. This is as important as the greatest king having the greatest battle in the world. Because with the sense of principles, the sense of history is gone. The 19th century never understood history anymore. The little things and the big things, they're all the same. There's no difference. Who can tell the difference? Am I to decide that the defeat of Darius by Alexander the Great is more important than women winnowing yesterday? Who says that is more important? The course of history was changed. What is that, the course of history? Can I see that? You see, many things are involved. We must understand that this is a problem, that for us, this picture, more than 100 years later, this was made around 1850, for us, almost 100 years later, this picture is just a picture, and we don't see anything special in it, because in a way we are brainwashed. But for those people in those days, it was a very heavy and vehement statement of something new, and they were really angry, very angry. They didn't want this painter. He was a revolutionary, and, well, they almost cut him up. And maybe this little drawing, this caricature of his painting makes you understand how they looked at the painting. This is what a painting means. So a drawing like this, caricaturizing a painting, I cannot show it you from, let's say, before 1750. It doesn't exist. Because there was nothing absurd, nothing strange in any painting then. But now, the absurd statement of Courbet that these peasants coming back from the fair are important. Well, then you characterize and says, well, what you're doing really is this. Then this is just a commentary out of the time. This is what he's really doing. And the man who made this was just this, because he was furious. He was mad. He was said, this is what the man is doing. Isn't he awful? You see what it means? So you must feel that this being against this is furious, being furious of the people around Courbet in depicting this. And it's really a horrible little thing here. You can laugh at the moment, but if you understand what's involved, it's not to be laughed at anymore. You see that this is a man who sees values are really torn at. These people feel maybe they didn't have the right words for it, but they felt now something of the real values are gone, are broken, they're done away with. We must ask ourselves, how was it in the world around Courbet? Let's say for the average man. And then we see that in fact, without this very explicit statement, it was almost the same. This is a fresco in the town hall of Antwerp. And the strange thing is, well, you see these are people in 16th century clothes standing in a room. And I would ask anybody in the world just to stand in front of this picture and tell me what it means. And I'm sure that nobody will ever succeed in telling you what it means. You just cannot see it. And then, of course, there are happily some words above and below it so you can read. And then you see that this is the moment that a certain Pallavicino is given the right to trade in Antwerp. It's some little fact out of the history of Antwerp. Some very unimportant fact. An Italian is accepted in Antwerp, that's all. But you see, well, if you know that, then you can look for it, and then probably you will find that this will be Pallavicino, because this seems to be a kind of, well, a man with, who goes around to tell it to the people, a crier. So this may be the burgomaster. But I say maybe, because you're never sure. Because what you see is just like a photograph. It doesn't give any interpretation, doesn't say this is important, that's important, but it just depicts everything as important. And the whole thing is really unimportant because the real sense for the real important things is gone. It's just, well, in a way, it's difficult for us to understand for us that people who could understand and love this were furious when Courbet did his things. But Courbet was maybe too obvious and made it too plain that values were lost. Yeah? Well, I'm sorry that you cannot see this, but I'm sure that everybody knows it. It's the Déjeuner sur l'herbe, the luncheon on the grass, is that not the name? Made by Manet. 1864. It's, well, I'm sorry, it's a colored slide, so there's not much to see. But to the right are three clothed gentlemen, and to the left is one unclothed woman. And we must understand that for us it is something of the past. But in their own days, this was something that everybody knew because the girl was a very well-known character in Paris. And the gentlemen were Mr. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so. So it was just something like, well, a little doubtful kind of luncheon of these gentlemen. And everybody knew what was around. And when this was first brought to the salon, there was a big fight over it. And people said, this is immoral. And then, may I have the next one? Try to have that. Oh yes, it has a bit better. Have the other one back again. This is a picture, as large as that, by Giorgione, which is in the Louvre. And it shows you two men, they're very dark here, playing musical instruments, and an unclothed woman here and an unclothed woman there. So what Manet said, well, look, you all go to the Louvre and then you look at the Giorgione and say, isn't that marvelous and beautiful? And now you go to my picture and you say, well, that's immoral and nothing. And it's exactly the same. Well, there was a big fight around it, but it wasn't the same, and I'm sure that Manet did know it, that it wasn't the same. It was quite different, because, well, maybe in those days it was hard for them to analyze this, because they had lost all understanding for old painting. So maybe to a certain extent, Manet was honest. He was honest to a certain extent in saying this is the same. But in a way you see it isn't the same, but it's hard to rationalize. Nowadays art history has gone so far that we can, and this makes you understand. If you just look at the left, this nude, she is pouring water into the well. Well, this makes us understand something is going on here. And, well, she is the nymph of the landscape. And so this nude here is the muse. So these two men are sitting in the landscape, and the muse is there to inspire them. And they're sitting in the beautiful landscape which is personified by this nymph, just as the ancient, the Greeks and the Latins had always done. So in reality there are no women there. This is not a strange outing of two men with two unclothed women. There's nothing like that. These two men are playing just in the beautiful landscape, and they're just inspired by the muse. But the muse is not something to be seen, but made visible in a painting, just as it is named in a poem in those days, a humanist poem. So it's quite different what you see here. May I try to have that one back? And this strange, naturalistic thing that... next one. No, get the next one, please. This strange naturalistic Déjeuner sur l'herbe by Manet. In the same year, or 1 year, yes, the same year, he made this, again, a nude on a couch, a lying nude, lying female nude. It's the old tradition again, but Manet wants to make so plain that something has changed, that he says, what happens if a woman is lying naked on a couch? Well, for Titian was no problem, because she was love and beauty. For Goya it was like this, well, this can be a portrait of your mistress. But you can be clothed there too. She can be either clothed or naked. Venus cannot be clothed, because then she's not Venus anymore. But now Goya-Cave. But now comes Manet, and he says, well, this is not a usual situation. You know, prostitutes do it. That's the only possibility. A nude on a couch must be a prostitute. He gives it a beautiful name. He calls it Olympia. But it is a prostitute. And everybody understood and was furious because something really deep and questions of value are involved. For real values are broken there. So this is what I meant with the first jump. It's called by Manet, the first jump in history of modern painting, where the content, the theme is gone, and there's only left the things you can see. Nothing of the values, the depth, the real world view, the ontological understanding of the world, which was before 1750. This is all gone, and what we are left with the things we can see, which you can directly experience. In philosophical terminology, we're coming now on the level of positivism. Positivism says we must begin by those things we can see and weigh and measure, and in any way, by our senses, understand. And if we want to make laws, who knows that there are any laws? Nobody knows. We only know that some things happen. So you just experiment and experiment and experiment, and out of the experiment you extract the law, but whether they are real laws, nobody knows. Something like that happens here. There is nothing like love and beauty. Love and beauty doesn't exist. This is the same problem that Mr. Schaefer and I often refer to. When things like this happen, then the problem comes whether a girl can love a boy, and whether it's not only sex. Because sex is something we know that exists in the world. But love, what is it? Maybe just a facade. This is what Freud said. He said it is sublimation, but just give it the right name. It's a facade we make to make it beautiful, but it isn't beautiful, basically. So something like this happens here. But this is, let's understand, it's 40 years before Freud. So earlier, these conclusions were drawn by the painters, and it is a burst job, and people were furious. People around this were furious. They were really committed to it, and they said, this cannot happen, this is awful. It was not just something that happens in painting. It's not just at random. Yes, may I have the next one? We can ask ourselves what's around in the world like this, and I'm very sorry that this is a dark slide, too dark for this room today, because this is by such a painter, let's say a salon painter. It's Hayes, it's an Italian, and it's called Ruth. You know Ruth, she was... Ruth, oh sorry, thank you. Ruth was allowed to gather wheat in the field, and here she's standing and she has wheat. I have a question to the painter. Why is she half nude? There's no reason for it. And here we see that under the cover of the old tradition, under the cover of being deep and general and a principle, a statement of a deep principle, something like this, he plays with it. He does as if these things still exist, but yet they do not exist. And he is not able to bring it into his painting. So in fact you see it's almost pornographic, because it is a woman who is just, well, exhibiting in a way. In a way, I like the Manet better than this one, because the Manet is honest. He says, a nude woman on the couch, it's a prostitute. And this man says, here you have Ruth. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that great? It's a big principle of, well, you just make the whole sermon around it. But at the same time, you're talking dirty. This is different. If you look at it, the way he does it, it's not naturalistic enough for that. Then he would have done it different. He tries to make it up. And to make sure that he has not right, but I'm right, I'm going to show you the ugliest painting in the world that I know. It's this one. So this is a few years later, 1874, if I'm right. It's by Gérôme. Gérôme is a French painter, and he wants to make a nude. And he paints a nude in the classical fashion again, just like the painter I showed you just a moment before. It's couched in the classical way with a strong outline, very softly and smoothly painted, different from Manet. But if you look at it a bit closer, then you see it's really something like a photograph of an unclothed woman seen from the back. And then, of course, for this painter it was a problem, because if Titian made a woman on a couch, there was no reason to make it up and invent a story, because she was love and beauty. There's no need to make a story. But when do women stand unclothed like this? Well, he invents a little story, and it's a horrible story. He makes it a slave market. And here you have all these sensuous men looking at her. And here you see that something else has entered in this painting. By Manet you still have the feeling it's honesty, and there's unity between form and content, but here it isn't. But in fact this painter is trying to say that this is a high, deep, humanistic, while in fact he is saying that woman is not anymore love and beauty, but it's just sex. It's just a statement of lust. She is an object of lust. Anger still tried to make an odalisque, tried to make the woman an object of lust, but in ideality. But she is simply an object of lust and nothing more. So the humanity out of the woman is gone. Again, this is so many years before Freud, but here the principle is gone. And I think this is a real pornographic picture. I think I detest it really, but I just wanted to show it to you to make clear what we're talking about. Tomorrow I'm going to show you what it means in Christian art. Yes? So, well, I'm sorry again, this is very dark, but what I'm showing you here is a picture by Degas. Degas is one of the men who comes after Manet. And Degas said, well, if you have going to have a nude, or let's say an unclothed woman, be honest. They are never in this world, unclothed women. Only when they're taking a bath. So I'm just doing like a look through the keyhole, and there they are. And he made it very beautiful, and it's still in the old tradition, but in fact he's just looking through the keyhole. This is the terminology he used himself. I want to make it just as if I look through a keyhole. And so there's the woman taking a bath. Well, in fact, this is really honest, because there's no high principle involved. It's just reality as it is. But you understand, we are far away out of this old tradition. Of course, the tradition is still there that it is an unclothed woman. Of course, the next generation will say, why shall I depict unclothed women? There's no reason to do it. And then this whole tradition is gone. This will be tomorrow's lecture. Oh yes, well, this is a picture you all know. I wanted to show you it in a different way again. This is a picture you all know, is Charles I by Van Dyck. You all know it. You know, he's the horse. And then here you have Van Dyck standing like this, very proud. You know it, he's standing against the landscape. What is great about this picture, I think it's the greatest depiction of a king ever made. He places it oblique. He says, he does it like this. He says, if I want to depict the great king, I can place him on a throne in all his majesty, with his crown and his big robes and so on and so on. But I'm sorry, I'm an humble painter. I will not be able to convey the real greatness of the king in this king sitting on the throne. So what I will do is bringing the king outside when he is on a hunt. So he is Mr. Stuart standing. It's not James I. But you see, he is so kingly. He is just like a king even then. If he is just a king at this moment, the real James I hunting, how would he be when he was on a throne? This would be something beyond depiction. It's just the same when you come to Versailles. You know, Versailles is just an outhouse. It's a small house in the country of the French king. So you come to Versailles and say, well, if this is a small country house, how would the palace be? Well, the palace was never built because that would be too great. Yeah. But it's involved like this. You see, this is the idea. He is so great that this is a still country house. So he is so great that if he hunts, he is even as kingly as this. How would he be on the throne? You see, there's an idea of making it up. And now look what a 19th century painter, the same man who did this horrible slave market, he made this. I hope you can see this one. Again, I think it's one of the most horrible pictures I'm showing you this morning. You see a man standing here playing the flute. He stands there. Well, it's Frederick the Great. Well, here comes Frederick the Great, and he has hunted. Here are some deer he has killed, and he has hunted, and he just plays some little tune. You know, he was a great lover of Bach's music, and so he just plays a little tune. And well, he has some maps lying there. So after a while, when he just finishes little tune, well, not music, it sounds too deep, just a little tune. He will take these maps and look which country is going to conquer next. Well, it is just debasing the king to something which is very low. Everything kingly is going out of it. This is the great king, but he is just lower than the lowest man. There's nothing left of his kingliness. Uses the same device as Van Dyck, doesn't understand it, and instead of making it higher, he really cuts it very low. This is the end of, well, just as with the woman, humanity is gone. This king is not a king anymore. Humanity is gone. It's become a problem. So we can understand, I'm going to finish now in a few moments, yes? So we can understand that painters began to do something else. I'm sorry, this is again very dark. It's Renoir, Moulin de la Galette. So here you have people, just ordinary people, sitting somewhere in a cafe in the open air under the trees. So here you have the trees, and these people are sitting there, and you see the light falling on them, and that's all. It's very nice. But he doesn't try to play it up. He doesn't try to make it deep. He doesn't try to make kings. Why should he? He said normal people are everything. So in a way, what I try to say is that Manet, Degas with his bathing woman, Renoir with his people just in the cafe somewhere, that they are more honest because they take things as they are and say this is reality. While the other people, they try to make something high as if it were an old tradition, but in fact making it more understandable how low it is and how humanity has really gone. And so we can understand that this creates such a big problem that many painters turn to landscape. Yes, may I have that one? It's a landscape here by Monet. It's just a view on Paris. Nothing else. He was sitting somewhere in a window and he painted what he saw. A vision of Paris. Well, maybe it's good. Well, maybe we can just go on and I'll repeat tomorrow morning. So, oh yes, this is the next one. So I just have one more. It's boats outside. It is, and I'm sorry it is so dark this time because I want to point you something else out, that he is really taking what he sees. So what the eye sees will be on the picture. So there is the object, and there are beams coming from the object, light beams, and they come in my eye, and there's something happens in my eye, and now in my brain, and now I can paint it. But yes, this is a problem. The problem of positivism. Let's put it first philosophically. I have a knife here. If I just open my fingers, what will happen? Everybody knows it will fall. So I just take it up from the ground. I will open my hands, and what will happen? It will fall. I'll take it up again. I will open my hands, and it will fall. I'll take it up again. What happens when I open my fingers? Will it fall? How do I know? This is a problem. If there are general ontological laws, I will say surely God made the world in a structure, so when I open my fingers it will fall. But if I say there's only those things that I can see and measure and weigh and nothing else, how do I know that when I open my fingers it will fall? And in fact, this is the big problem of positivism. And positivists have said, well, what we do is in effect statistics. We take something and we let it fall 1,000 times. And then we presume that the next 1,000 times it will fall again. But we just presume. We don't know. And a law is just like statistics. We have measured that it always falls in a certain way, with a certain, there's certain laws to be defined about this. Well, the next 1,000, the same laws can be applied. But we're not sure about it. It's just statistics. Just like I know that if I have a certain thing, economics works on the same principle, sociology works on the same principle. If I have so many people of that type, of that kind, and if I put such an article on the market, so many people will buy it. Well, probably it works. Maybe not. Who knows? Well, it's just the same principle in the laws of nature. So now, this is the same thing. There is reality. Boats. Well, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that nice? Outside, boating, yachting, holiday, color. Well, there are the colors coming to me. Reaching my eye, I'm painting. But who knows that there's something behind the colors, behind the beams, that is really a boat? Who knows? I'm sitting here and there is something, or at least I don't know whether there's something, there are beams coming to my eye. This is a real problem. So we understand that Monet, who was a great painter, a real great painter, he understood this problem. And he dared, at a certain moment, to jump over this. Exactly in 1885. It's a very important date in history. One day I hope to make a whole year's course just on 1885. It's a very important date because this is the date that Monet made the change. He just jumped over and he said, I don't know whether there's any object. There's only the thing that reaches my eyes. So he let the reality fall behind the paint. May I have the next one? I hope we will see something. Well, maybe just look in some kind of textbooks. Some are hanging around upstairs in Lamelaire. Here you have these dots of colors, but this is a row of trees, but in fact there are no trees, there are only dots of colors. There are dots of colors. Tomorrow I'm going to begin with this same problem. I'm going to show you this again. Let's hope that tomorrow it rains as far as this is concerned. And then I want to show you that the people around Monet were really in great distress. There was a crisis in the whole world of these impressionists. And they all felt there's something going. And they didn't dare to go on. And you see Renoir, who was following Monet exactly in 1885, coming into a crisis, trying to do it classical, finding it is impossible to do classical, and then fall back in a second-rate bourgeois painting, I would almost call it. Nothing left. He was never a great painter again. And you see Pissarro, another friend, turning to somebody else and following somebody else. You see Van Gogh, exactly in this moment, coming in Paris, beginning as an impressionist, feeling there's something going and trying to recapture reality. And that's what the great painters did, the great builders of the new modern art, they tried to recapture. What they really tried to do is to recapture the universal. Because we had only the individual, that what we can see can be depicted. There's a boat, I can depict this boat, only this boat. These peasants going home from the market. This woman lying on this couch. I can paint that. But I can never paint women.